Recording? 本日はジャパニーズサービスグループの Webcast にご参加いただきありがとうございます。I would like to welcome you to our Spotlight Webcast, Japanese Service Group Germany. My name is Asagi Hino. I work at Deloitte in the Business Tax International Tax Service line and part of Japanese Service Group Germany. I am joined today by Thomas Kunawa and Simon Parsons, both of whom I would like to extend a warm welcome to.
Hello, Asagi.
Hello, thank you.
So, who are you? What do you do? And what do you think about VAT? Thomas, if you would like to start.
Yes, thank you very much, Asagi. Good morning also from my side. My name is Thomas Knauer. I'm a VAT partner in the Stuttgart office of Deloitte, Germany. And I'm experienced in advising in VAT since more than 25 years for international clients and also especially for Japanese clients in Germany. Generally, I have some background in techniques as well, but today we have a very technical topic, and therefore I definitely need support from my colleague, Simon Parsons. So Simon, would you please introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Hajime Simon desu. Dozo yoroshiku. I'm a director in the tax technology consulting practice with Deloitte Germany, based in Berlin. I have a VAT background. I'm a chartered tax advisor from UK, and I focus primarily on the intersection of VAT with compliance, supported by strong technology, governance, and processes. And it's a pleasure to be presenting to you today.
Okay, thank you both very much. We want to take a look at the topic of e-invoicing in this webcast today. As you have just said, Simon, the Federal Council has given its approval to the Growth Opportunity Act, meaning that e-invoicing will now be mandatory in the domestic B2B sector from 1st of January 2025 in Germany. The law contains two staggered transitional provisions for issuing electronic invoices. However, domestic entrepreneurs will have to ensure the receipt of e-invoices from 1st of January 2025. This raises several questions for entrepreneurs and members of tax department, and certainly for you too. How can companies best prepare for e-invoicing? How can I prepare for it? What deadline do I need to observe? Which department in the company are affected? How can the new regulation be implemented smoothly during ongoing business operations? On the basis of these and many other questions, the two of you, Simon and Thomas, will now address the topic with further questions and provide us with a roadmap that can safely guide us through the changeover in the company. Before we get started, however, I would like to point out that the webcast will be recorded and can be accessed through our website. No personal data will be stored, and with that, I would like to hand over to you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asagi. This is our agenda for today. What we will do today, in the first step, we will talk a little bit about VAT in the digital age, better known under the word VIDA, the VIDA proposal from the European Commission for changing the Mehrwertsteuersystemrichtlinie, the German, the EU directive. In the second step, we will talk about, as Asagi mentioned before, about the Growth Opportunity Act, which finally came into law in Germany and introduces obligatory e-invoicing in Germany for domestic transactions. Then we talk about the challenges by implementing the e-invoicing, what is necessary, who is involved, and so on. And finally, we will have a short look on the upcoming changes or expected changes or developments in the digital area. So the next slide gives you a short overview about the history of VIDA. The important point is on the below right-hand side in the corner, as you can read, 2 days ago, there was an ECOFIN meeting, and the VET in digital age, the so-called VIDA proposal, was not approved because there is no agreement between the member states. But this does not mean that it will not come into force at some point of time. But there is, let's say, some more time or discussion necessary in one point. So the next meeting will be, as far as I understand, in June 2024. So we will see what happens then. The goals of the VIDA proposal have not changed. These are 3 goals. One is combating fraud. The second is simplifying taxation of the digital economy. And the third goal is the reduction of compliance costs. These goals should be achieved by using 3 pillars according to the VET in the digital age. One of the pillars is the digital reporting requirement, including the e-invoicing, which is the main focus of our webcast today. I will talk to this in some seconds. The second pillar is the single VAT registration. Just for the sake of completeness, I mentioned also the second and the third pillar. The third pillar is the platform economy taxation, which is under discussion as well. And also interesting to note is that with regard to the digital reporting requirements and the e-invoicing, as well as the single VAT registration, which is already a little bit known under the one-stop shop registration or international import one-stop shop registration, there is no discussion between the member states. The discussion is only with regard to the platform economy. But we now skip for today single VAT registration and taxation of platform economy. We will focus on digital reporting requirements, especially on the e-invoicing. And if you can see on this slide, with regard to the e-invoicing, the proposal now foresees mandatory issuing, transmission, and receiving of electronic invoices as of July 2030. And what is also important, the proposal says there is no necessity for the recipient's consent to receive electronic invoices. Several hybrid formats are possible. As a standard for domestic supplies is also possible. And if the possession of an e-invoice is a substantive conditional prerequisite for input tax deduction, should be on the member state's discretion. Summary invoices are on monthly basis possible. But it's also important is to notice that invoices need to be issued 10 days after the taxable event. And another important point is that after issuing the invoice, latest 5 working days after, there should be a near-time or real-time reporting to the tax authorities, also from July 2030 onwards. But can a little bit be postponed until the end of 2034. As the e-invoice becomes mandatory and the near-time and real-time reporting also becomes mandatory, there is no need anymore for recapitulative statements. They will be abolished, as well as the call-off stock simplification rules, as there is no need for these simplifications anymore or for these statements, because the data is in real time with the tax authorities. So yeah, I think this is what I first would like to mention with regard to VIDA. On the next slide, we see the several possibilities we currently know within the e-invoicing area with regard to the inclusion of tax authorities for the different regulatory models to the exchange of invoices. On the left-hand side, you see, and there's also the German flag. You see, and this is a little bit, let's say, early bird for that, what comes for Germany later on. You see the idea of Germany. There is the so-called interoperability. The exchange between the supplier and the buyer can be directly or via a service provider, but needs not to involve tax authorities. This is the let's say, easiest model Germany would like to go to. On the and the right-hand side, you see several regulatory models we see in other member states, for example, Italy or Spain, or in third countries, where a clearance with the tax authorities with regard to e-invoicing is foreseen and necessary. So, for example, Italy asked for a predefined infrastructure, and other countries like India, Egypt, or Kenya would like have a pre-issuance approval, or Spain, for example, is going for a post-receipt approval. So what we are going to do now, or to discuss now, is the German legislation with regard of e-invoicing. So we will see what the Growth Opportunity Act includes. The first slide here also gives an overview regarding the timeline with regard to the political discussions we have seen end of last year, beginning this year, in order to approve the Growth Opportunity Act. Long discussion. At the end of the day, it's history, because it was now actually approved and is coming into law. And the mandatory e-invoicing for domestic B2B supplies is introduced into the German law on a quite smart way. Let's have a look on the next slide, please. So what does the new legislation foresees? Let's say it in this way. Up to today, or up to 1st of January next year, when the law came into force, actually, the understanding of the tax authorities and also the broad understanding of a lot of entrepreneurs was or is that the normal way to issue an invoice is a paper invoice. E-invoicing was allowed after consent with your business partner, but it was something special for the tax authorities. Now the mood changed completely. The new standard will be the e-invoice, and all other invoices will be so-called other invoices. Other invoices is a description of invoices which do not fall under the format of the e-invoice. This means paper invoices, which will be possible for some years more. We will talk later a little bit about this. PDF invoices. This is not a machine-readable structured invoice. It's a picture at the end of the day, which can be sent electronically. All these kind of non-structured invoices will be called other invoice. The implementation of the e-invoicing, the obligation to e-invoicing, is limited on B2B supplies. What this means, we will talk a little bit later, but important to know why B2B supplies. B2B supplies are regulated by the German tax authorities for the domestic transactions. The cross-border transactions, as we have seen some minutes before regarding VIDA, will be ruled by the European level in the VIDA proposal, and the German tax authorities are quite straightforward. They say we do the domestic stuff. The international stuff should be done on EU level by the VIDA proposal. And last but not least, the e-invoice definition is based on a format or on the standard. It's called EN 16931. and all invoices which comply with these standards are electronic invoices. All other invoices are other invoices, not electronic invoices. The format itself is, as far I have to look it up, it's PayPal 3.0. Actually, it's very technical stuff. Maybe Simon is saying something about this later on. But we will now step on the next slide, and we will use the definition EN 16931. Just recapitulate again. New statutory term newly introduced in the law is the definition of other invoices. These are paper invoices or invoices that are not interoperability with the standard EN 16931. I think this is a very smooth and very clear definition. So on the next slide, we can maybe talk a little bit on the question limited to B2B supplies. So this means that both the supplier and the recipient must be established in Germany. The German territory on the right-hand side, you can see it in green on the map. It's quite clear. I think this is not the issue. The question is, what does it mean established in Germany? If you have registered authors or business management in Germany, I think this is not the big issue. It's a little bit more about the question, if you have a permanent establishment in Germany, are you obliged to use the e-invoicing or not? So therefore, the definition currently is that you are only obliged with a permanent establishment if the permanent establishment is involved in the supply, actually involved in the supply, and this is also important. The definition of the permanent establishment is the definition following the VAT law, not the general tax law. So it's slight differences between this. So if you have permanent establishment, then you have to check this in detail if you are affected from the e-invoicing or not. On the secondary level, what is not so often so important, but sometimes it is important, the tax authorities look with regard to the question if you are established in Germany or not on the residence or on the habitual abode. Good. Then again, with regard to the EN 16931 format, this is the European standard coming from the directive 2014-55. What is also discussed or agreed is that on agreement between the issuer of the invoice and the recipient, a different electronic format can be used under specific conditions. And these conditions are shown on the next slide. Below you see the EDI procedure mentioned. So the issuer of the invoice and the recipient of the invoice can agree on the use of another structured format, electronic format, which actually allows at the end of the day that from this other structured electronic format, the VAT relevant information can be extracted so that the result complies with the EN 16931 standard. So this was introduced into the law, especially with regard to the EDI procedure, which is broadly used in Germany in several industries, for example, in the automotive industry sector. And it's a good, let's say, practical practice. A lot of businesses use, and in order to allow them to use this way of exchanging information, especially invoices, also in future, this was brought into law under the precondition that it must allow to extract the relevant information to comply with the EN 16931. That's the reason why this other structured electronic format is also possible. Okay. So now we come to the, let's say, the most important issue or question. What we will learn and understand today from the workshop is the question regarding timing. On this slide, you can see the yearly steps and what is changing over the next years with regard to the domestic e-invoicing rules. Currently, in the year 2024, we are in the first row of the slide. You see, it's possible to use electronic invoicing with the prerequisite of consent of the recipient. You can use the standard EN 16931, of course, today as well. We can use ADI procedure, also on consent. We can use other unstructured invoices like PDF and so on, which also can be sent electronically, but as discussed before, these are not structured data, not machine readable. It's a picture and more. So this is not compliant with the standard EN 16931. Therefore, but it's possible to use it also on consent, because currently the German law mentioned if you want to do it in an electronic way, you need to have the consent of the recipient. And the normal, generally accepted procedure to issue invoices is the paper invoice. As of beginning next year, 1st of January 2025, Asagi mentioned it before, you or your business must be ready to receive electronic invoices following the standard EN 16931 without the necessity of prior consent from your side as recipient. So you must be able to get these invoices and to store it and to have a procedure in place to work with these invoices. For the other invoices, like ADE procedure, unstructured PDF invoices, for example, and paper invoices, nothing is changing. So on the outgoing side, you still can issue paper invoices or follow the ADE procedure or PDF invoices like this year. The same also applies for the year 2026. So there changes nothing. The next and most important change will be in place as of 1st of January 2027. As you see on the left side, the receipt of invoices, it's clear, it's possible, you have to accept electronic invoices as in the years before. ADE and unstructured PDF invoices are still possible, but for unstructured invoices, there is a special additional prerequisite coming into place. So as you see on the bottom of the slide, unstructured PDF invoices are only possible if your revenue in the business is lower than 800,000 euros in the year before. So for most of us, I suppose, for most of us, this means as of 1st of January 2027, we must invoice B2B supplies, domestic B2B supplies, in an electronic format following the EN 16931. And this is from 2028 onwards, also for, let's say, the small business in place. So I think for all of us, the two important dates are the 1st of January 2025, in order to be ready to receive electronic invoices in the standardized format, and latest as of 2027, we must be ready to issue for domestic transactions electronic invoices. So what does this mean? If we have a look on the next slide, Asagi, there are a lot of challenges connected with the issuing of, or with the readiness for issuing and receiving electronic invoices. And a lot of questions involved, but have to be kept in mind when you are thinking about e-invoicing procedures. So the very important and big question for you, for us, is to what extent I am affected from this upcoming change. To what extent I am affected, and what are the drivers for the extent how far I am affected. Coming from the end, as we have discussed before, you must be ready to receive these new electronic invoices as of 1st of January 2025. Therefore, everybody will be affected. But how far you will be affected it depends on various things, on the domestic level, on the type of activity, of the nature of the supply, local supplies, B2B supplies, B2G supplies. For example, if you do B2G supplies, you have to use the e-invoice, which is in line with the European standard EN, and so on. The nature of the supplies, we have the rule here for domestic supplies. We have cross-border coming with the VIDA proposal somewhere in its future, volume and so on. And also it depends, do you need a domestic or worldwide, or let's say a region solution for whole Europe, for Western Europe, for all over the world? This is very interesting. So Simon, what can you say, and how can you help in this mess?
Thanks, Thomas, for the very good summary of the legislative background driving changes in our business. And we all face challenges in complying with this new law. So I'll start by going through a number of challenges which we see as the most important. So as Thomas has explained already, e-invoicing is not just a German topic, and it's not just an EU topic, actually, with the VIDA reforms. There's also a global topic, so we can see countries around the world, South Korea, Malaysia, Kenya, have implemented similar mandatory e-invoicing laws. So what I would do first is ask myself, have any of my colleagues implemented e-invoicing within the group of companies? And how did we do it there? What were the difficulties? But perhaps most importantly is to confirm within your company what other countries are also planning to go live with mandatory electronic invoicing around the same time. For example, in Europe, Poland have announced new laws, France, Belgium. So what pressure is this putting on us as a tax department or procurement department? And how can we cope with this? What pressure is it putting on our own resources? Now, the next challenge I want to address is perhaps the more of a commercial view. So I would consider, who am I doing business with in Germany, and what are the volume of sales and purchases per transaction type? So on the AR side, if customers are private individuals, then there perhaps is less of an impact because I'm making B2C sales. Mandatory structured invoicing in Germany applies to B2B sales. But then, if my customers are businesses, I should also assess the nature of my B2B sales flows. Where are the business partners located? Where do we ship goods to? Inside Germany, cross-border? Because again, mandatory structured invoicing applies to domestic sales in Germany. And for both AR and AP, I would also consider the attitude of my business partners, my suppliers, and my customers. How do they see e-invoicing in Germany? What would they prefer from a commercial perspective? So under law, suppliers can issue without consent e-invoices from the 1st of January 2025. Will they be ready to do so? Perhaps you can ask. But also, the law doesn't say this, but your customers have their commercial power, and they can perhaps ask you to issue electronic structured invoices sooner than the law says, because they want to reap the benefits of receiving the invoice data in a digital format and integrate it with their AP procurement processes and make them more efficient. So this brings me to the IT-related key challenge. So I need to look now at my IT landscape and not just my main ERP system. I need to consider subsystems such as billing tools, billing engines, and also my procurement platforms. And of course, this landscape could be different across entities within Germany, across jurisdictions. We need to consider which systems and processes which support the technology, which of these processes need to be adapted for which entities, and also for which VAT registrations. The next challenge is the content of electronic invoices and related purchase orders themselves. So where does my data come from? Some elements of individual transaction data required in the EN 16931 format may not be held in your FI, in your general ledger. So this adds complexity to your IT setup and also data processes, whether automated or manual, and also the flow of data through your company. So I need to review whether I have complete and accurate transaction level data, which allows me theoretically first to prepare a compliant invoice within the regulations, and which is then subsequently archivable and auditable by the German tax authorities. So the European norm, the EN 16931 standard, is EU standard, and that has around 150 data points, which depending on the country can increase or decrease slightly. So in Germany, we have the Ex-Rechnung format, and this actually has an additional 20 data points to the sort of European framework. So let's say roughly we need 170 data points to create and issue a compliant structured electronic invoice. So this means your master data needs to be good quality, so complete and accurate, and it should flow in and out of AR and AP processes. And this includes things like your pricing calculations to come up with the invoice amount, or your tax code determination, which then triggers the calculation of VAT at the applicable rate under law. And importantly, your customers need to be happy with the structured e-invoices they receive from you in Germany. And from your perspective, you need to be able to read the invoices you receive, match them to your purchase orders, and process the approvals if you are happy. But you need to be able to recognize when you receive an invalid invoice and reject it, and complain to your supplier that they are issuing you with non-compliant invoices. Because after all, there is no input VAT deduction, so no refund from the tax authorities if you receive an invalid, non-compliant structured electronic invoice. Now, the next challenge is, where does this sit in your organization? So the tax department is often considered the key stakeholder of electronic invoicing, because like in Germany, in most countries, the obligation is introduced through tax law. But IT, procurement, sales teams will have to work together with the tax department to ensure that the invoice content, master data, transactional level pricing is obtained and maintained within the organization and flows through a hopefully efficient process to create a compliant sales e-invoice at the end, or on the purchase side, that we only accept compliant electronic invoices. So with these stakeholders, we need to consider, are there competing priorities or other initiatives like an ERP update rollout, which prevent colleagues in other departments tackling the issue of invoicing within the timelines in Germany? And the final challenge I would like to highlight, in introducing mandatory structured e-invoicing, the German tax authorities give themselves the opportunity to monitor the tax compliance of businesses in a more standardized, automated way. This means we expect more audits, more transaction-specific queries, more frequently and closer to the time of supply, when the goods and services were actually supplied. So commonly now you have a Betriebsprüfung, a full tax audit, maybe 3 years after the end of the calendar year. This could change because the tax authorities now can demand and expect that your records are in a standardized digital format. So this more intensive external oversight put pressure on tax departments, we think, and those on those who are responsible for master data maintenance and AR and AP processes. So a small example, today not every customer record may have their bank account details associated in their customer record in your ERP system. But this is required to be stated in the X-fractional format. It's not all bad news. The legislative change does have a benefit because it can drive improvement. So mandatory e-invoicing can be used as a trigger to automate and digitalize processes. In 2027, you can be sure to receive purchase invoices electronically in a structured format, and you will also have to issue them. So it is possible to invest now in an automated process based on this known format to allow the data to flow directly into AP processes for matching and approval without OCR scanning or the manual review PDF invoices, saving operational costs. Likewise, structured e-invoicing can be used to make the issue of sales invoices more efficient. So as customer and vendor master data improves to meet the format demands of e-invoicing, transactions can be given the right tax code, the right VAT treatment, first time right. So fewer errors going forward. This means your compliance picture within the company improves, making future tax inspections less exhausting. And certainly the tax authorities are seeing e-invoicing as a driver to digitalize their audit process. So audits may happen more frequently, but they should be more efficient and end quicker than they currently do in Germany, we hope. So another benefit from e-invoicing is that it should lead to better cash flow management, which is perhaps the best benefit of all. So if suppliers and customers are forced to invoice in a consistent, structured way, then related approvals and payments and receipts of cash should happen quicker, which of course helps you achieve your own commercial imperatives of growth. So those are some of the challenges, but also potential benefits of the new law. So I'll hand back to Thomas.
Yes, Simon, thank you very much for this overview and this description of the challenges and also of the chances which are now given to the audience with regard to the e-invoicing procedure. But moving forward, if we want to implement the e-invoicing, what should we consider? What should we do? So how does the implementation actually work? Simon.
Well, I think the nature of the law, it requires you to think and act digitally in order to be compliant. So technology in combination with mandatory e-invoicing is very important. So we need to meet abstract legal obligations written down once, but we need to meet them all of the time. And in the modern world, it's only possible to do so by integrating the law into our IT processes. Of course, IT is used by real-life humans, so we need to do it in a way which is user-friendly, but at the same time legally compliant. We need to avoid any unexpected risks and delays and errors caused by technology and people using technology. So mandatory e-invoicing today, that's what we're talking about. But in future, due to VIDA, it will lead to the legal obligation of e-reporting of individual transactions in near real time. Tax authorities want this essentially so they can see what the supplier is saying and what the buyer is saying, and matching that they both agree. Now, if there's a difference, then there's potential VAT fraud or just a mistake. But of course, meeting these near real-time reporting obligations, it's not possible to do this manually given the high volumes of transactions we are involved in as a business. So in the end, transactions will need to be recorded accurately first time because the tax authorities will learn about them from both sides sooner. And there will be more efficient audits and less time for us internally to carry out retrospective reviews and correct errors before they are detected. And commercially, technology matters. You want to receive compliant invoices from your suppliers, and they want to receive them from you. So let's avoid arguments simply because the invoices are not in a compliant format technologically. Aside from this, there's a risk of disallowed input tax under VAT law and also administrative fines. The e-invoice is not received and sent properly. So purely digital business records also have to be stored, archived securely, and be accessible over many years. And this technological process, doing so, has to be understood, documented, and explainable to the German tax authorities potentially today, but also many years down the line. The technology is very important. Data quality is very important. There are various formats distributed throughout Europe. They're called CIUSs, Core Invoice Usage Specifications. So they all start from the EN 16931 standard, but then each country can publish their own specific requirements. So fields that you have not previously populated for business partners in your ERP system or customer record management system, they have to be maintained now. So in Germany, we have Section 14 of the VAT Act, which prescribes the content of a valid VAT invoice. But then in the e-invoicing formats, information such as the contact person, bank details, the region of the customer should also be stated in the invoice. We can speak or make a comparison with things like intrastat reporting projects. So region is a field which is often not populated or maintained within company systems. So to fill it, you need to introduce a process change or a mini project and additional effort to complete this one field in the records of all your customers and vendors. So basically, as a company in Germany, I now need even more a strong, sound financial technology base simply to comply with the law. And it needs to be fed with accurate data. But fortunately, improved data quality then also leads to potential for automation and efficiency, as I already mentioned. Now, stricter reporting obligations will continue to come to tackle tax fraud and the VAT gap in Germany, the EU and beyond. So it's a real driver. I mean, there's a need now to create this basis that is technologically capable of coping with these regulations and trends in the future. So this can save your own nerves, but also help you keep your customers happy. I think we can move to the next slide.
Yeah. Simon, thanks a lot. Before starting discussing this slide, one additional information to the recording of the e-invoices. As Simon mentioned, this is a legal obligation, of course, and this has, of course, be in line with the German general accepted accounting principles, the German GAAP, and especially, of course, with the German GOBD. So the rules for record keeping given by the tax authorities. So there was actually an update on these rules. So it makes sense to keep this in mind by implementing such a project as well. But moving forward, implications of e-invoicing for incoming invoices. As you see from the left-hand side of this slide, as of 1st of January 2025, you must be ready to receive invoices in this special format. Sooner or later, you will only get invoices in this format, and you need to process them. So, Simon, what happens with these invoices?
So what I want to illustrate here is that after an invoice is issued by your supplier, you need to receive it. And you'll need something positioned after the receipt of the invoice, which will convert that XML file, the digital file, into a format which is one, legible for humans, so we know what's going on, but then also convert it into a format which can be consumed by your downstream systems. So the key takeaway from this slide is that, the IT solutions, there are third-party providers out there, or even the ERP company itself, SAP, Oracle, will develop solutions to help you handle this area. Now, when you have the digital information received on the purchase side, it's received digitally by default. So there's the opportunity to have a target of fully automated processing. So you can introduce some tax logic or ERP add-on, or even AI, to review the digital information, make sure it's complete, correct compliance, and improve your AP approval process. So today it may take months for a paper or PDF invoice to be received, typed, or scanned into a financial posting and then reviewed and approved. Here, the opportunity is to do it quicker, more automated, and more efficient. So I think now we can move to the AR side.
Yeah, maybe one more. As Simon mentioned, the idea is on both sides, a fully automated processing, giving the opportunity to gain efficiency by booking and taking into account the incoming invoices and outgoing invoices. On the outgoing side, we noticed the challenge of having a fully automated process. On the incoming side, we also want to have a fully automated processing on the outcoming side. Simon, what needs to be done on this side?
So here the big pain point is data quality. And here we're not just talking about Germany, EU or Europe. I mean, there are country-specific requirements for electronic invoices. We need to know what needs to be included for VAT purposes, what is optional, but perhaps preferred by your customers to help you get your invoice approved and paid quicker. What other information is mandatory under other law, commercial law, which has to be contained in the e-invoice format of the particular country you're looking at. So depending on the company and where it operates, and depending on the regulations, we need to comply with many country-specific requirements and also update them over time. And again, there are different players on the market who can provide support in transmitting invoices. And in some countries, you need to transmit the invoice by a government portal. But these IT solutions, they aim to look to ensure that the invoice is syntactically correct in the IT sense. But they don't necessarily check that the content of the invoice makes sense commercially. So it's 10 euros instead of 100 euros. They won't check that level of detail, and they won't check that under that VAT law, that all the requirements are fulfilled elsewhere, such as archiving. Another point to talk about here is transmission. So in Germany, the idea is that you send your invoices to a customer in a mutually agreed way. Now, how many mutually agreed ways do we want to agree with a customer? Customers have different attitudes and different needs. Now, if it's open to negotiation, this could cause more effort. How many methods of transmission do I want? And because of the differences between the countries, Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, Malaysia, etc., you may think once you've implemented e-invoicing in the main country, say Germany, it doesn't mean that necessarily the job is done in another jurisdiction.
Well, as Simon mentioned beforehand, there is no prescribed transmission path. On the one hand side, it's a great opportunity to agree with your customers. On the other side, it brings also some uncertainty because it's heterogeneity in the systems. Maybe if you're thinking about taking a third-party service provider for the production of the invoice, does this change the issue materially? We think no, honestly. Why? Because the big challenge also by producing the invoice, as mentioned by Simon several times before, is the accuracy of the data. Simon mentioned 107 data points which are needed to produce an X invoice, for example. And this must be accurate and correct. And this is the big challenge. So this does not change if you make use of a third-party service provider just for the production of the invoice, because you may have to make sure anyway that you provide the correct data. So, Simon, if we now want to start implementing e-invoicing, what should we do?
Well, like any IT-related project, it's a journey. So it's cross-functional. We have to define the stakeholders, the other people in the organization you rely on to be compliant. Then we need to consider our IT landscape and whether we want to focus regionally in Europe or globally across the world. What meets our own specific industry and market needs? What are our customers saying? What are our suppliers saying? Then we need to consider data quality again and then implement our strategy so it works. So we need to see, do we have any gaps in our existing processes, fill in the gaps, and then test them. So any solution needs to connect seamlessly with all your systems and reduce manual steps, and therefore reduce risk. Then we come to monitoring and checking. So legislation changes over time. If it works today, will it work tomorrow? What risks do we have legally or syntactically within the invoice format we're using today? And we also have to consider IT updates and restarts. So for example, the PEPL 3.0 format mentioned earlier has already had 4 amendments to the template since the beginning of the year. Then we can use this way of working to consider other jurisdictions where similar legislation is coming into force. And also we need to prepare for VIDA with the new timelines, which are, as Thomas said earlier, still under discussion, but will come in future. So we need to think about the long term too. So if we can move to the next slide. What does this mean for you or for me, for us now? If you have not dealt with e-invoicing yet, then you should do so as soon as possible and raise a level of awareness within the company about the topic. We can make, let's say, commercial arguments, elevated pitches here to encourage support in your initiative. So we can say on the invoice receipt side, the AP side, this law change can increase our efficiency and reduce operational costs. When you've identified who's involved and made them excited about the change, we can take this company-wide project further. And how do we do this? Create a vision. Where do we want to be in a year's time, in 3 years' time? Does it make sense for us for economies of scale to have a global approach and a single technology solution for AR and AP? Or should it be regional or local with different invoicing solution providers? Then it's all about execution. How do we get it done? And how do we operate our invoicing process consistently over time? The e-invoicing is about protecting your company's input VAT deduction. And it's also about making sure your company gets paid on time by issuing compliant invoices which are accepted by your customers. So together we need to implement e-invoicing to protect our commercial reputation and to stay happy.
Okay. On the next slide, a short view on what is coming, what is on the upcoming side. We will see, or we have seen on the next slide, please. We have seen in the coalition agreement of the current German government as of the year 2021 that there is a clear will to introduce a standardized nationwide electronic reporting system as quickly as possible. What does this mean? Honestly, I do not know in detail, but it's mentioned in the coalition agreement for this current government period, which ends next year. Let's look if there is something coming from the government or not, but it's already at the level of attention at the level of government. So we will see here some steps in the future as well. And connected to this, on the next slide, we see that the German Ministry of Finance actually, in a letter to professional organizations, April last year, was saying that they want to have a standardized electronic transaction-based reporting system. So it's not only on the level of the government, it's also on the level of the ministry. Though we finally may expect changes in this area as well. So we need to keep our ears open on the developments on this side. Asagi, I think it's now your turn.
Thank you, Thomas and Simon. それでは簡単に日本語にて説明させていただければと思います。今年3月末に成立した成長期開放によって構造化された E インボイスの義務化ルールが導入されました。したがって B2B 取引を行う国内事業者は2025年1月1日より構造化された E インボイスを受理できる体制を整える必要があります。新ルールはいくつかの移行期間における猶予を含んでおりますが、原則的に E インボイスの発行は2027年1月1日より義務化されることとなります。構造化された E インボイスとは、EU におけるスタンダードフォーマットである EN16931 に依拠するものと定義されており、その他の請求書、紙や PDF、EN16931 と同等のものとみなされない請求書に関しては、新ルールにおいてその他のインボイスとして定義されています。新ルールはドイツの事業者が対象となっており、また国内 B2B 取引に限定されています。したがって B2C 取引やクロスボーダーの取引に関しては適用外となります。また EU のレベルでも VAT in Digital Era 略称 BIDA と呼ばれる提案がされております。2019年に欧州委員会に提案されてから今現在に至るまで完全な合意には至っておりませんが、最新のドラフトによりますと2030年7月もしくは2034年より導入される予定となっております。BITA が EU 各国で導入されると、現在施行する国内における E インボイスルールを超えた VAT ルールの改革が行われることとなります。BITA 提案は、現在行われている月次もしくは四半期ごとの申告ではなく、取引ごとの申告をする必要があるというルールを含んでおり、その申告期限は請求書の発行5日以内と非常に短く設定されていることにも留意が必要です。また、ルールは EU 加盟国で導入されることにより、クロスボーダー取引もこの対象となってきます。EU で共通の EU 電子請求書のフォーマットを利用する必要があるほか、請求書の発行に関する期日についても、課税の対象となるイベントの後10日後というルールが含まれております。電子請求書に関する新ルールは、税務・財務のみならず、他の事業部門や社内プロセスに大きな影響をもたらす可能性があります。そのため、新ルール及びそれに対応するためのシステムの導入に関する情報を早い段階から社内で共有することが重要となってくると考えられます。データがいかに正確か、漏れがなく完全かということが非常に重要となりますが、そのためには業務システムを最適化し、常にモニタリングしていくことが必要となってきます。システムの構築及びその利用を周知・熟知することは非常に時間のかかるプロセスです。今回の構造化された E インボイスに関する新ルールにおいて、2027年1月1日までの猶予期間が設けられておりますが、2027年1月1日以降は、原則的にドイツ居住の事業者は国内 B2B 取引に関しまして、構造化された E インボイスを発行する必要があります。そのため、2027年までの猶予期間をテスト期間とし、ERP システムやプロセスを設計、導入、テストし、2027年1月には法律に準拠した構造化された E インボイスが問題なく利用できる状態にしておくことが推奨されます。EU レベルのビタンに関する動向を含めた税法のアップデートに着目し、それに適用するようなプロセスの最適化を常に進める必要があると考えられます。 日本語でのサマリーは以上になります。Thank you both very much. That was very informative. After your presentation, we know at least what an e-invoice is, who is affected by the mandatory introduction, what is meant by the EN 16931 standard, and which deadline should be observed. Apologies for being over the time. Looking at the clock shows me that our time is up for today. Thank you very much for your participation. And of course, thank you both. You can find contact details in the beginning of our slide. I would also like to take this opportunity to draw your attention to our next event. In June, we will be devoting another bilingual Japanese service group webcast to the topic tax audit preparation from a data perspective. The invitation will be sent out in some days. If you have any questions, please contact us at any time. Otherwise, we'll see you here again next month for the Spotlight webcast. We look forward to a lovely participation here too. Have a pleasant working day. See you next time. 本日はご多忙のところご参加いただきましてありがとうございました。良い一日をお過ごしください。
ありがとう。
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good time.